Mark and Mallory, thanks for spending time this evening to kind of go over some two very important topics, coordinating your legal documents with actual care for the clients or for people that need continuing care as we age and as this population ages. So just to kind of tee off, maybe I'll ask each of you, what do we actually do? What are our credentials and kind of why do we love what we do? And maybe we'll start with you, Mark.
Thanks, Jordan. My name's Mark Siegel. I'm a co-founder of Our Sierra Home Care. We're an independent concierge home care business based in Buffalo Grove. We serve Lake County and Northern Cook County, and we got into this business of providing home care for individuals and families because of the experiences we had caring for our own loved ones. And when we saw the need for what families experience, we wanted to help as many people as we could.
Awesome. Mallory, what do you do?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you, Jordan, for having us. And Mark, I'm excited to be on the panel with you tonight as well. I am a certified elder law attorney. I practice probate and elder, trust and estates, and litigation, and kind of everything that comes with that. So I will say I'm one of only 10 certified elder law attorneys in the entire state of Illinois. So this is pretty much what I do all day, every day. I'm a little unique in my practice. I define elder law a bit broadly. I think a lot of practitioners, when they say elder law, they're focusing more transactional and in long-term care planning, Medicaid planning, asset protection, which I do in about half of my practice, and the other half I'm in court. In fact, came straight to this from court this afternoon um, all day. So, in that, I'm doing guardianship work for adults with disabilities or minors, some probate estate work, contested estates, financial exploitation, kind of the whole kit and caboodle that comes with aging or disabilities and the legal space, and then that comes with that. And I'm a partner at Chuack and Texan in Chicago. I lead our elder law group.
So both of you got the credentials, got a very busy schedule, help a lot of people, one from the care side, one from the law side, but most people they experience those separately. Maybe how does the coordination between the two really work? Maybe how do you guys coordinate those two, or why is that so vital in your minds?
Yeah. I can jump in first here, Mark, on how I, would look to our Sierra in my for my clients. A lot of times, I think anybody who's in the home providing care is it from the legal perspective, your front line, and so I am oftentimes getting calls from a Mark or from that side of it saying, okay, we have this scenario, but it turns out they don't have their estate plan documents in order. Or we've got a couple of kids that are involved here, but they're not the power of attorney and they're saying their siblings not really sharing any information with them. And a lot of times that could pull me in. But when I'm already working with clients, and they're in a situation where they're dealing with an aging loved one or aging parent and care needs have changed, then my first response to the client is, all right, then who in our tool belt can we reach out to start getting this whole team together? And if that means aging in place and we need care at home, I'm looking to Mark. I'm looking to their team to try to see how we can make that happen for that loved one.
I think the biggest challenge that we find is families not having conversations that they need to have. Too often, it's a crisis situation where that forces a family's hand. Someone has a fall, it's hospitalized, and then there's a whole series of events about care that have to take place. And we spend a lot of time trying to talk with families and encourage them to talk through what they actually want to have happen. And it's a really difficult thing because it's fraught with a lot of interpersonal dynamics that are challenged, whether it's the older generation that may be the ones that are going to need care sooner, that have this sense of not wanting to give up control of their lives. They feel like they don't want to confront these issues. It's about their mortality. It's about giving their children potentially or others some control over their lives. And it's the kids who worry about and when I say kids, I'm talking about, people in their 50s and 60s, the children of these people that are worried about their parents, don't know how to have the conversation. And as Mallory said, oftentimes you've got people at that next generation with different views, playing different roles, and sometimes with very different and occasionally disturbing personal agendas. And so what we really try to do is encourage people to have the conversations. One of the things we always talk about is that having these conversations is the ultimate exercise of control by the older person. When they're in the position to be able to actually make a decision, be able to explain to their family what they want to have happen, what assets, if any, that they've set aside to do this, how they want care to play out. These are the things that families have to do. And too often we find they haven't had those conversations amongst themselves and they haven't reached out to Mallory, right? I mean, the critical piece is to understand what you want to do, talk to a professional like Mallory to figure out how to give life to what your wishes are, and document it so that people actually know what to do and have the authority to act on a person's wishes. It's a funny thing. I run into some people, when we talk about powers of attorney, some people who say, I don't want to give someone power today because I'm just not comfortable with that. And I turn to them and I say, if you're not comfortable when you can express yourself, how can you possibly be comfortable when you can't express your wishes? You may have the wrong person you're thinking about giving that authority to, or you just have to realize you've got to let go a little bit. This person that you think is going to play that role, you want them to play that role and you want them to know what to do now.
And maybe I'll just
Well,
add
and
there, if you have a power of attorney, that doesn't mean that person has control right now. Mallory, kind of when does that control come into place?
Exactly. That's what I was just getting ready to jump in. You teed it up perfectly there, Jordan. I was just going to say, a power of attorney. I think there's such a misconception that means, oh, now it's a carte blanche. They're going to do everything and run away with my life. And actually, even if you have a power of attorney signed that says it's effective that day, even if that's the case, the person naming someone to make decisions for you, you're the principal and you're naming an agent to make decisions for you. You still maintain the ability to make those decisions for yourself until you are no longer able to. And so I think that's so important. And I think Mark's point is well taken about communication. I always say if 90% of my clients communicated more, I wouldn't have a job. So, I think the other part of that though is exactly what Mark is saying. Okay, you're naming these people. That's a ton of control that you have now to say who it is that you trust, but it really needs to be somebody. And then the next step is you're not done when you sign the document. The next step is have the conversation so that that person knows, one, you named me, and two, my job's not to do what I think is best whenever I want. My job is to do what you would do in this situation if you still could make that decision, and only do that when you can't make the decision anymore.
Right. And
But
that's
but that requires that family to have the conversation, and too few people are having that conversation. Do you want to stay home? Do you want to? Are you open to going into a facility? What is it that you want to have happen? And it really is about people talking to each other. And when families try and have these conversations, they bring the entire baggage, all of the baggage from their life together. This is what I do for a living. But when I talk to my own parents about their care, I'm still their kid, talking to them about what they should think about doing. And that's a very different thing. For me, one of the big crises in my life was when I learned that my father, who has Alzheimer's disease, made a phone call to my mother because he got lost and he couldn't find his way home. And we wanted to figure out, how to get him to give up driving for his safety, for the safety of people around him. And my brother and I were in lockstep. We both sat down with our parents. We talked to my dad about giving up driving, and he just wouldn't listen to his sons tell him he shouldn't be driving anymore. And so we reached out to his neurologist, and we got his neurologist to weigh in and say that he shouldn't be driving anymore. And oftentimes, the family dynamics that preclude people from having some of these constructive conversations require you to bring in a third party who the family members view as being more objective, not having the personal baggage that we all bring to the table, and help the family work through those things. And that can be someone like Mallory, that can be someone like a geriatric care manager, it can be a neurologist, a physician. People, there are so many people on the care continuum that can help families navigate these issues. And families just need to know to reach out.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. You need to make sure to have that conversation, but let's be frank, it's people do have baggage. People have dysfunction in their family. It's not fun to talk about that, long-term care, home care, what do you want to happen with your health? But those conversations now while we're healthy are so valuable. We try to have that for our clients as well as much as possible. So we're proactive. So the family's at peace when something does occur. Let's talk about maybe a little sample scenario. Let's say hypothetically we have someone, Rachel, she's recently divorced. Okay, she has a young child that's 13 and maybe one that's 15. And let's say Rachel's parents say they're Mr. and Mrs. Green. Maybe the mom and dad they moved to Florida maybe 10 years ago and they were living in Florida for a while. They got a lot of wealth. But then let's say that Mr. Green passed away. And now Mrs. Green is in Florida. She's having some maybe mental situations, but just plays it off to say, yeah, it's just old age, it's no big deal. But maybe Rachel knows that there's some issues. But Rachel, she has another brother. His name is, say, Chris. And Chris, he lives in California with his girlfriend. Rachel and Chris, they don't get along too well when it comes to decisions for the mom. In that kind of a scenario, and the mom isn't close to her home base and maybe needs some extra care, what could we do or what should families think about? Because I'm sure things like this happen all the time. So maybe tell us a little bit what you guys would do.
Well, I think I would guess if this is a scenario that I can relate to very well with my clients. So my guess would be the first call I'm getting is from Rachel. It's not going to be from Chris and it's not going to be from Mrs. Green. So Rachel's the one who's going to call and she's going to sit and tell me all of this stuff and she'll share everything you just shared, I would guess. Um, and I'm also probably going to hear a little bit about how I would call Rachel sandwich generation. So she's gonna share with me how stressful this is for her too, because she's recently divorced and dealing with raising her own two teenagers. And so I would call this getting close to a crisis situation for Rachel, depending on how stressed she is when she calls. And so we would probably go through a lot of scenarios where I would be asking her, okay, does mom have a power of attorney? And if she does, do you know who's she named? And if she doesn't, how is mom? You say she's telling you she's got having some kind of old age moments or senior moments. What does she mean when she says that? What are you experiencing? And also, is mom, even though she and dad had been there for 10 years, to me that sounds like they snowbirded and decided this was their retirement plan. And so I'm going to ask Rachel, does mom want to stay there now long term, even though dad isn't there? That this was not her plan. Her plan was to be able to stay with her husband down there. Or would mom be willing? Or does mom want to come back to Illinois and be a little bit closer, because it's hard for you and Chris being out in California, you being here, to navigate it all if mom doesn't even have a community down there yet, really, that's willing to step in or be boots on the ground, so to speak. And then I'd probably also talk with her about mom's finances and try to get an idea too of, is this what I would consider, a traditional scenario for mom's generation, in terms of, did dad, and of course I'm being as PC as possible, of course, but a lot of times with this generation, dad is often the one who managed the household finances. And so I'd want to get an idea of, is your mom well informed on what's going on? Is she comfortable stepping into that spot, or is she stressed by that now too? And from there, we try to figure out what is the long term plan and how independent is mom, or how much help does she need, so we could figure out what the next steps look like.
Gotcha. So have that conversation, then talk about legal documents. Mark, when it comes to care, kind of what things would we look to do for someone like Mrs. Green in that scenario?
So you want to understand what her current condition is, what her medical and mental wellness are all about right now. You want to understand where she's living and whether it's a safe environment for her, what physical changes may need to happen, what is the support system that she has, where she's living right now. Is she effectively on her own? What are you doing to so ultimately the first thing you want to make sure is someone is safe, right? Then once you figure out that you've got them in a safe situation, and depending upon physical issues, that may require modifications to a home to make sure someone is okay. You want to make sure that she's got the support in her day-to-day activities so that if she needs any assistance, someone's there. Or does she just need some companionship, some socialization to make sure that she's okay? Because if she doesn't have that type of socialization, they've proven, through studies that people's conditions worsen if they become more isolated. So the socialization is a really important thing. But you have to take that all into account, and you're weighing that against what is her current situation with what are the options for her future. As Mallory was saying, do you want to then look and say, does it make sense for her to move back by Rachel? Is that a good thing? What does that do to the dynamic with Rachel? Does that add stress or relieve stress for Rachel, or maybe a little bit of both, right? Because it's a lot of I'm gonna ascribe to Rachel that we know she's the daughter. Uh, the statistics show that it's typically the oldest daughter is the one who leads care for their parents. That's just how it plays out, and there's the data to support it. It's not stereotyping. And so the question is, how does this all manifest itself? And so you want to make sure that you're planning for the family as a unit for the long term, not just in the moment. So you want to think about what are the immediate needs and what is that plan.
Awesome.
One of the biggest issues is going to be, the dynamic between the two siblings. And the question I'd put to Mallory is, you have that initial conversation with Rachel, but who are you looking to have be your client at the end of the day in this process?
It's interesting that you ask that, Mark, because there is such a huge difference in answers that you will get in the elder law community. It truly is a topic. Who is the client of almost every conference I go to? I operate in this scenario with Rachel as my client, especially if mom already has powers of attorney. I look to representing her in her fiduciary role for mom, and how are we going to then tackle her carrying out those fiduciary duties for mom. A lot of people look at mom as the client, and the concern that I have with that at times, maybe not in this scenario, sometimes I have concern with that because mom isn't the one in this scenario who contacted me. I also don't know what mom's capacity, her mental abilities are at the moment. So if she doesn't have powers of attorney, I still actually look to Rachel as having formed a relationship, an attorney-client relationship with Rachel. And I usually in that scenario refer mom out to individual counsel of her own, to make sure that she's also being heard, and what her wishes are being followed, not necessarily by Rachel dictating it to me, because I've already advised Rachel on what her next steps could be in that child or fiduciary capacity.
But what do you do? Assume there aren't powers, and this. Rachel's told you about the relationship with her brother. How do you navigate that? Because I think that is too often the case where the documentation isn't in place,
Mhm.
and there are some challenges between the family members. I mean, in terms of resource use, we've come across some siblings who believe that money shouldn't be spent for care because they expected an inheritance. So I mean, you kind of it's as many flavors as 31 flavors used to sell, if not more, in terms of what you can experience.
Yeah. So in that scenario, I mean, Rachel's the one who contacted me. So for me, it's very, regardless of the dynamic with her brother. If there are no documents, then what I will say to Rachel is, mom, if mom wants to and is able to, she's needs her own independent counsel to do this. And then if she appoints you, then we're back there. I would always encourage. Now she's told me the dynamic with her brother, but I usually encourage back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. There's no reason to be less than transparent in the communication. You're both children, even if you don't get along. Not sharing updates about mom, even if they're good updates, if you're not sharing, all it does is make everybody suspicious. It makes them think if you're not sharing, you're hiding something. So in my cases, I'm almost always encouraging, let's communicate more than not, even if you don't have to, so that we can make sure that the family is all on the same page here. There's no reason not to. You're both kids. However, I am advising on the duties as well after that. So if we have, talked about the tools that Rachel's going to need here. So I'm saying, okay, Rachel, let's look at care options. Let's call Mark and his team and let's see what that is. Mom's gone to her own attorney. Now she's got her documents. She named you as power of attorney agent. So now we're going to build your team. Let's go talk to Mark about the care and keep Chris updated about what we're doing here because you're here. Okay. If you need to tell him what we're doing. And let's also talk to Jordan because mom has no idea what dad had or what was going on. So Jordan's team also needs to look at this and make sure we know what the heck this financial horizon looks like for mom and how we're going to pay for all of this. And I'm kind of going from there. So advising Rachel, Rachel communicate. Advising Rachel, Rachel communicate.
Here's a question, Mallory. Rachel, maybe she has all the legal documents in place, but what if
Mm-hmm.
Chris doesn't agree and he's like, no, that's not what we're doing for mom. I don't want to pay for that care. I don't want to do this. What can he legally do if all the documents are in place and he disagrees? Is there anything?
Yeah, of course. Of course. This is America, Jordan. There's always room for litigation. Oh yeah. If Chris doesn't agree and the documents are in place. So in my scenario, what I would call the ideal clean scenario of mom went to her own attorney on her own and did her documents. We don't have Rachel driving her there and telling her to sign something. We don't have Chris doing that. We have mom doing it. So, assuming that happened, if Chris still doesn't agree, then yeah, he's going to have a whole host of options. He would need to probably obtain an attorney himself. And the next steps for him are to, petition a court either to claim that he doesn't think the powers of attorney mom signed are valid for whatever reason. Maybe he doesn't think she could have signed. Maybe he thinks she was pressured. Or he, oftentimes, what I see in this scenario, in fact, that's where I was just at court today, is nobody's getting along and the powers of attorney are there, but they're still fighting and we're in guardianship court. And a lot of times, sadly, that is where these sort of disputes end up.
Now, we can't control anyone's, arguments, but obviously, as we mentioned earlier, if we're proactive, if mom talks to both kids, explains the wishes, they understand. Rachel communicates with Chris, Chris communicates with Rachel, even if they don't get along, that'll hopefully minimize the chance of being litigation. But this is why we want to be proactive, have legal documents, make sure the parents know the wishes, and have these tough conversations. Would that be a correct assumption?
Exactly. Exactly. And mom being a really active part of that communication too.
Well, the funnest thing to talk about is let's talk about money, okay? Paying for this care, okay? So when it comes to paying for this care, correct me if I'm wrong, Medicaid isn't going to pay for home health care. These are things we have to plan ahead of time on. Would that be true, Mark?
Yeah, so there's different, let me just kind of walk you down a little bit of the care continuum. So what we do is called home care, generically speaking, and that's what it's considered non-medical care. And so that would be companionship, that's help with activities of daily living like bathing and dressing and toileting, eating, things like that. And then there's homemaking, helping with errands and doing medication reminders and taking someone to appointments. Then you get to home health. And home health is physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and skilled nursing. So those are the two primary areas that people are interacting with. Medicare and Medicaid would cover the home health. Commercial insurance would cover the home health because you're deemed as being receiving medical care when those things happen. For what we do, generally it is not covered by Medicare. It is not covered typically by commercial insurance. It can be covered by Medicaid with it if you meet very strict asset and income restrictions. But what we do is generally speaking is private pay. Now, there's also another bucket of benefits that some people are able to access for veterans. There are certain veterans benefits that veterans and their surviving spouses can access for this type of care. But for all intents and purposes, I think people need to consider what we provide as being private pay. Unless you have, even when you have long-term care insurance, which is a type of insurance that will pay for the type of care that we provide or for someone in assisted living or in a skilled nursing facility.
So, Marco, one thing I think we talked about months ago, and I believe this was you, and if it's not you, still take the credit for it. You said that, your children, you want to be your children. You don't want them to be your caregivers. And that really resonated with me because obviously my parents aren't at that age yet, but I don't want to be, changing diapers or helping them do these different things where that's why that home health care and some of these things that makes their quality of life better is because you love your parents. And again, that resonated with me because you want to make sure that you are there to support your parents, not always on those physical or some aspects, but really to be a child and not have to deal with those things. But the paying for it is important, right? So one thing, again, if I didn't mention this, I'm the owner and CEO of Wealth Financial Services and Tax Advisory. We can look at alternatives maybe to help different investment accounts or policies to help pay for some of these things that is even more broad than long-term care. So if you can't do the two of the six activities of daily living, like Mark alluded to, feeding, bathing, toileting, you can actually get some tax-free money to help pay for that. And that could be a service like Mark's, or maybe a family member to help support, and you can kind of get that tax-free. So paying for these things is important. Having a plan is even more important. But also we want to make sure we have an estate plan. Because a lot of people, they have higher net worths potentially or different things, but no matter how much you have, if you need continuous care for 5, 10, 15 years, that could wipe you out. So maybe Mallory, tell us how we can be proactive when it comes to estate planning to make sure that a longer term and whether home health care or maybe a long-term care facility doesn't damage your overall net worth.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because that estate planning scenario might look different depending on when you're walking in the door, right? Because I think most people, even if they have a taxable estate, when I say taxable estate, I mean, $4 million or more in Illinois, 15 million federally. So we're talking sizable estates here. But even when those individuals are walking through the door, the first thing that we're going to suggest is, do you at least have a living trust in place, a revocable living trust in place? There's tons of different tools when you've got something sizable like that, but that's going to be our first question. And then where are you in life? So if you're you know already retired, you're maybe you have grandkids already, and you're aging at this point, and you're just now getting your estate plan in place, or one of your partners, maybe it's a married couple and one of the partners has some medical needs already, maybe not in-home care level, but maybe they have a history of having had a heart attack or a stroke, or they are showing some mild impairment or something like that. That estate plan is going to, yes, include trusts that we're talking about. However, it is going to also probably be layered. We're going to layer that with some additional future triggers that if they ended up in a situation where home care was needed or even a facility was needed in the future, it's going to trigger a way for the spouse who has higher care needs to still be able to receive funds, have funds protected in a trust without it jeopardizing their ability to potentially qualify for public benefits like Medicaid in the future to pay for things. If we're talking about a very high net worth estate, then these are individuals that unlikely are going to be people who would need any kind of public support helping them pay. These are most likely people that are going to be privately funding their healthcare, their care costs going forward. Usually it's the people that are coming that are I'm going to say 500,000 to a million married couple total assets. And that's going to include a house. That's usually the people that are walking in, and they're going to ask the first thing out of almost every couple's mouth is, am I going to lose my home? I don't want to lose my home if something happens to me. And so we will do a traditional estate plan most likely, but if they're in a situation where they already have knowledge or they already think, yeah, higher care costs are coming down the road, then we're going to start looking at what are some other tools besides your traditional revocable living trust that we could use. Are there some irrevocable trusts that we could use? Is there a gifting that we could consider doing right now to a child, to somebody else who has disabilities or is receiving disability benefits from Social Security? Is there something else that we can pull in here? Are we able to convert any of these assets that you guys have into an income stream so that it's not necessarily a countable asset in the eyes of public benefits, but we are increasing income for our higher care costs or our higher monthly expenses? There's lots of different tools that we're going to start looking at layering in there, that are going to check off boxes of planning exceptions that the state will allow, especially for the protection of a married couple.
Just want to ask Mallory, because a lot of this thing you talked about is proactive planning, because some of the tools you use, like irrevocable trust or gifting, isn't there a 5-year look back in Illinois? Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. I'm going to say with an asterisk because I'm an attorney. So I have to say it depends. So, yes, I would say, generally speaking, there's a 5-year look back. So, some of this, when I talk about irrevocable trust, that is for sure who I would call a proactive planner client because they're coming to me. No, no, nobody has a crystal ball. Although, if you could see behind me, there is a crystal ball that I keep in my office, but nobody actually has a functioning crystal ball. And so I sometimes call that 5-year planning, where somebody, they're not in a crisis, they're not in immediate need of these very high level skilled care or something like that. But we think we have some wiggle room where it might be 5+ years before more advanced care is needed, in which case we are doing planning with the thought that there wouldn't need to be any application for benefits for 5+ years.
Thank you for that. Now,
It's important that you talk about the crystal ball. The reality is that the studies are showing that more than 70% of people, when they get over 65 years old, are going to need some type of long-term care. And people are living longer and they're not necessarily living healthier. And so the needs for care are increasing, and there's all sorts of talk about inflation. But if you think about the consumer price index, that's nothing compared to the rate of healthcare inflation. It is well outpacing CPI. And so, it's important that everyone realize that this is something that they're going to have to plan for. And you hear, I'm sure you all hear the same thing I do. Oh, I'll just jump off a cliff, or that's what I have my gun for. And there's all these people who say, well, if it happens to me, this is what I'm going to do. I won't have to worry about it. My family won't have to worry about it. And that it's just, it's kind of silly. And so that's why it's important that everyone reach out to professionals like the two of you to really think about the legal and financial planning for the future.
you
I
said
read
that
a statistic. Sorry, Jordan. I was just saying, I read a statistic from the U.S. Census Bureau. 2034, so just less than 10 years, is the first time in our history that we're going to have more older Americans than we are children. And they're saying with by 2030, that's our marker for every single baby boomer having reached the age of 65 or older. So I agree completely, Mark, that it's not going away. Care costs are increasing and our older population is getting bigger. I mean, you just can't ignore it. And the other thing is, when people say, well, I'll jump off a cliff, things like that. Well, okay, but that's where we've got Rachel and Chris and all the family that comes into the picture, and they're not gonna just sit by. So it becomes a whole family affair.
you need to have a plan. You need a plan for tomorrow. You need to know what's going on because, 70%, like you mentioned, Mark, that's a huge statistic. The reality is people don't plan. At least 70% don't even come close to planning for these kind of care costs. We all have homeowners insurance, but one out of 144,000 homes will burn down. 70% chance we need some care. We need to have a plan for that. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. So let me just kind of ask you, Mark, what is an ideal client for you? Like when people come to you, what is the ideal situation? How do you navigate that? Tell us kind of a little bit, what's that ideal client where you can help?
So we pride ourselves on tailoring what we do to the needs of the client. And so for us, every one of our clients that we've had has been very different. Every family dynamic has been different. We've been very fortunate that for the most part, we've had families that have been, absolutely in alignment for their loved ones. And, I know that makes us a little bit unusual in terms of what we do. But it's people who are someone in the family is open to care. That's the access point for us. It's not always going to be the person who is ultimately our client who's open to care. There's oftentimes, a series of conversations that we have with the family, including who our ultimate client will be, to talk through what it is that they want to have happen in their life. We focus on needs and desires because for us, it's all about taking care of someone, but giving them joy as well. And so the ideal for us is someone who would be open to the conversation with us, but there is no prototype of client for us. Everyone we tailor what we do to the individual client and their family.
So you meet them where they're at, provide them that care because you actually care and want to help them. Thank you for sharing that, Mark.
Yeah.
Mallory, tell us a little bit about the ideal client when they come to you.
Yeah, I really like that, Mark. That resonates a lot. I kind of want to echo it a little bit for myself because I there's a lot of things that could make somebody a less than ideal client, but it's not necessarily the scenario for me that makes it ideal or not. I enjoy I enjoy is actually an understatement. I love the work that I do. I find it challenging but incredibly fulfilling. And so if somebody's coming to me, even if they're a crisis, we didn't do any planning at all situation, I'm fine with that. And I enjoy navigating that with my clients, not enjoy it in a weird, sick way, but I enjoy it in a I like to be a voice of reason that can bring a little bit of calm to what can be a storm that often is coming through the door. And so it's less about the scenario that's ideal and more about if they're coming to me, just like what Mark was saying, if they're coming to me, is this a client that will work with me? Will they be communicative? Will they be organized? Even if they're not organized, are they receptive to the advice and the suggestions? Are they reasonable? I think that for me is more what makes the ideal client, less than is this a chaotic scenario that's coming through the door, and more are we going to be able to work together and cohesively to get to a good result for everybody.
Love that from both of you. And one thing I think for all three of us, we love what we do. And that's clearly evident in every day and how much hours we put into our work. But we also have a passion for people. We want to support them and make sure we navigate these challenging areas. So, as we all do different things on this Zoom call, Mallory, the elder law attorney, Mark taking care of the care, me making sure the finances and the investments keep up with those care costs and making sure your legal documents are coordinated with someone like Mallory. At the end of the day, we want to integrate all these things so our clients have that
Yeah.
peace of mind that they know their family's taken care of, their legal documents are in order, and that money is going to last them a lifetime and maybe generations to come. So we appreciate those that have watched this video. We will be putting some contact information for all three of us at the end of this video, and hopefully we can help you in the near future. Just want to shout out to Mark and Mallory for any last comments before we wrap up the call today.
I think that watching the video alone tells me that you're a thousand steps ahead of the game. So, I welcome the opportunity to help anybody that I can. So, thank you truly for having me on the panel and letting me share some of my thoughts tonight.
Thanks, Mallory.
Thank you, Jordan and Mallory, for tonight. And I agree with Mallory. Don't be bashful. These are tough, tough things to tackle. And what I've learned since we've been in this business is that there are so many people like Jordan and Mallory and our team who just want to help others. And even if we may not be the one that can provide you with the solution you're looking for in an individual instance, everyone I've come into contact with has the heart to share and help people find resources to navigate the challenges that they're feeling. And so please don't feel like you're alone. Please know that there are lots of people out there who are experiencing what you're experiencing, and there's also people out there like the folks on this panel who are here to help you navigate the challenges.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for everyone that watched. Hope you can live with confidence today and plan with purpose for tomorrow. And hopefully, we can be a part of your journey to give you that peace of mind. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone.